The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for October 24th through the 28th of 2022. Okay, let's start out with the Aussie-NZD pair.
Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there was strong long strength confirmed from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, confirming normal short strength. However, many months later, price came right back up to that pivot high to override this normal short strength and thus creating strong long strength. And so in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a long trade that formed right here and a short trade that formed in this area right here, and I'm still waiting for lower confirmations to see which trade is stronger. And so in the short term, I'm neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. All right, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I'm looking at. So the last weekly long trade that formed was in February right here. And the last weekly short trade that formed was right here, just 3 weeks ago. Now going strictly from the strength differential between this long trade and this short trade, there seems to be more long strength than short strength. So the bias seems to be long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, although this long trade seems to be stronger than this short trade, the lower confirmations at this point is confirming a short bias. Okay, so we're having conflicting signals at this point. So let me go ahead and show you how I plan to trade this setup. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Right at this point right here, a couple of weeks back, we had confirmation of normal long strength with a breakout and immediate break back in. However, weeks later, price came all the way back down to that pivot low, where that normal long strength was created to create strong short strength, and thus confirming that weekly bias that I just showed you into being short. Now you want to remember the lower confirmations always have the ultimate say in terms of these biases. And so all things remaining equal, if price pulls right back up to these 1.13 levels, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high and its main target way below at that weekly bias's pivot low that I just showed you. Okay, but that said, like I showed you in the overview, there's overarching strong long strength on this pair through that monthly strong long strength. And so I much rather have some strong long confirmation confirmed on these lower time frames so I could take that long entry. Okay, but for the time being, since the lower confirmation was confirming strong short strength at this point right here, and that weekly bias is short for the time being, again, if price pulls back to these 1.1300 levels around here, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high and its main target way below at the weekly bias parameters. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this one. Okay, let's go on to the Aussie Yen pair. Okay, if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please check out my forecast manual, which is an instruction manual that helps you better understand these forecasts and provides as a guidebook while watching these forecasts. And the link for that is in the details section of this video. Okay, this is the monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there was strong long strength confirmed on this pair also, with the trend line breakout of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, confirming normal, short strength. However, 2 months later, price coming right back up to that pivot high to override this normal short strength and thus creating strong long strength. And so in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, there was a long trade that formed in these areas and a short trade that formed recently in these areas right here. And at the current moment, the lower time frames is confirming a weekly short bias. And so in the short term, I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, so on this weekly chart, the last long trade that formed was right here. And the last short trade that formed was right here about a month ago. Now going strictly from the price elements that provide short strength for this short trade and long strength for this long trade, it seems this short trade is stronger than this long trade. And so going strictly from price elements, this weekly bias seems to be short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. Okay, and if you want to know the price elements that are providing short strength and long strength for these trades, please refer to earlier forecasts. Okay, so again, the weekly bias seems to be short at the moment. And moreover, we did get confirmation on the lower time frames of strong short strength roughly in these areas, actually confirming this weekly bias to be short also. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, draw on this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. And so we got a breakout, an immediate break back in, confirming normal long strength, but price coming right back down to that pivot low, overriding that normal long strength and creating strong short strength, and thus confirming that weekly bias to be short. Okay, and the way you want to remember how lower confirmations work is that if a higher time frames bias is long, for example, the lower time frame should show strong bursts of long strength also. Okay, so in other words, you want the lower time frame strength to confirm the higher time frame strength. And in this case, the weekly bias was short. And moreover, on this lower time frames, we're seeing strong bursts of short strength. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so for the time being, since this weekly bias does seem to be short, all things remaining equal, if we get a pullback to these 96.70 levels around here, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high and its main target at this pivot low. Okay, and you want to remember this stop loss and this target is created by the weekly biases risk parameters I just showed you earlier. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this one also. Okay, so let's go on to the euro dollar. All right, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this price action right here is very strong short, and this move right here still having a ways to go, in the long term I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a short trade that formed right here and a long trade that formed right here, but at the current moment I'm still waiting for confirmation of this bias, and so in the short term I'm neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I'm looking at. So the last short trade that formed was right here about a month ago. And then right after that, a long trade formed right here. Now going strictly from the strength differential between this short trade and long trade, this long trade seems to be stronger than this short trade. So the bias is long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And again, refer to earlier forecasts for an explanation of what is providing strength for both these trades. Okay, but on the lower time frames, right in these areas right here, there was lower confirmation of strong short strength, actually confirming this weekly bias to be short. Okay, so we do have conflicting signals. So let me go ahead and show you how I plan to trade this setup. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, the weekly bias parameters is between this pivot high and this pivot low right here. Okay, and right at this point, from this pivot to this pivot right here, we had a breakout, an immediate break back in, confirming normal long strength, but price came right back down right away to this pivot low to override this normal long strength and thus showing signs of strong short strength. Okay, and you want to remember the lower time frame confirmations have more say in terms of these biases. Okay, so all things remaining equal, if price pulls back to these 1.0050 levels around here, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high and its main target right here, giving me the risk parameters of the risk being this much, while the profit potential being this much right here. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this one also.
Okay, so that's it for the weekly forecast. Now just a heads up, on the Aussie Yen pair, the weekly bias seems to be short at the moment. And so if price pulls back to give me a good risk-reward ratio, I will take that short entry. However, you want to remember that the Aussie Yen does have overarching long strength on it. So I much rather have the lower confirmations confirm a long confirmation so I could trade long along with that overarching strength. Now I'm sure you guys have noticed that there's times when I only trade in the direction of the overarching strength, and there's times when I trade counter to that overarching strength. Now the way I decide which trades I take depends on whether or not I'm trading aggressively or conservatively. So from a day trading perspective, aggressive trading means you're willing to trade with the overarching trend and counter the overarching trend, while conservative trading only trades along with the overarching trend. And it has absolutely nothing to do with how much monetary risk you're taking on each trade. So a good thing to remember is that whether you're trading conservatively or aggressively, the monetary risk for each trade should never change. And the difference between conservative and aggressive trading is simply the frequency of trades that you take. Okay, so I hope you guys have a great week, guys. And thanks for watching. Okay, bye.